Richard Gere was never loud. He never chased attention, and he never relied on spectacle to hold an audience. For decades he stood quietly at the center of Hollywood while other stars fought to dominate the spotlight. Gere did something different. He let silence speak for him. But behind the calm expression and composed smile was a man dealing with pressures that very few people ever noticed. This is not the story of a fallen star. It is the story of a man who paid a quiet price for choosing truth over comfort, conviction over safety, and inner peace over applause. On the surface, Richard Gere's life looked almost perfect. By the late 20th century, he had become one of the most recognizable actors in American cinema. His presence carried elegance and restraint that felt rare in Hollywood. His rise was not explosive. It was steady, built on performances that suggested depth rather than spectacle. Roles like Julian Kay in American Gigolo, Zach Mayo in An Officer and a Gentleman, and Edward Lewis in Pretty Woman did more than make him a romantic leading man. They turned him into an icon. Audiences projected their fantasies onto him, while studios relied on his quiet charisma to anchor stories about love, redemption, and transformation. But beneath this image was a truth Gere would later admit. Fame never gave him the peace people assumed it did. Even at the height of his popularity, he felt disconnected from the identity the industry had built around him. While many actors chased bigger projects and constant publicity, Gere often moved in the opposite direction. He turned down roles that felt hollow. He avoided publicity that demanded he perform off-screen. Slowly, he grew uncomfortable with the machinery of fame. This was not arrogance. It was unease. A growing feeling that success had arrived without bringing real meaning. Long before the wealth and recognition, Gere's life had been far more fragile than most people realized. In the early years of his career in New York, he worked steadily in theater but still struggled financially. Money was scarce and proper meals were not always guaranteed. Hunger was not a metaphor in those years. It was part of daily life. Gere later admitted that he often survived on simple food like eggs and avoided restaurants because he simply could not afford them. Those difficult years shaped him deeply. They left him with a sensitivity towards suffering that fame never erased. Even when success arrived, that early vulnerability stayed with him. While the world celebrated the image of a perfect life, Gere was quietly asking himself whether the cost of maintaining it was something he truly wanted to keep paying. Long before he spoke publicly about spirituality, the struggle had already begun inside him. As a teenager, he often felt a deep sense of alienation. Later in life, he described it as a quiet but persistent discomfort, the feeling that the world he had been taught to believe in did not match the reality he was living. That inner conflict followed him into adulthood. As his career grew larger, the feeling only became stronger. When his face became instantly recognizable around the world, he did not feel fulfilled. He felt exposed. Interviews, premieres, and constant attention began to feel intrusive rather than celebratory. Gere later admitted that the more famous he became, the more he wanted to disappear. Fame did not feel like freedom. It felt like confinement. At a time when most actors were expanding their visibility, Gere began stepping away from the traditional Hollywood path. He declined roles and limited his public appearances. Agents and executives struggled to understand why someone at the peak of success would walk away from momentum. But this was not career fatigue. It was something deeper. Richard Gere had begun searching for meaning. That search eventually led him toward Buddhism. For Gere, it was not a trend or a public image. It was something personal and necessary. Meditation offered him something Hollywood never could. Silence without judgment. A place where he did not have to perform, impress, or explain himself. As his commitment to this path deepened, his priorities began to change. He gravitated towards smaller films and more complex characters. Commercial success mattered less than personal alignment. But this shift came with consequences. Opportunities slowly faded and his visibility in Hollywood declined. One moment in particular quietly changed his relationship with the industry forever. It happened during the Academy Awards. While presenting nominees, Gere stepped away from the prepared script and spoke about human rights abuses in China, calling for the liberation of Tibet. He did not shout or attack anyone. He spoke calmly and respectfully. But inside the industry, things quickly changed. The reaction was not loud. It was silent. Studios called less often and projects moved forward without him. There was no official ban, but the consequences were clear. Hollywood had become increasingly dependent on global markets, and China was a powerful one. Gere's stance made him commercially risky. In later interviews, he admitted that his films began losing distribution opportunities in certain regions. Roles that once would have come easily were now offered to others. He was not publicly punished. He was simply overlooked. Gradually and quietly, his presence in Hollywood diminished. Yet Gere never tried to repair the damage. He did not soften his position or apologize. He accepted the consequences of his choice. While his career was changing, his personal life was also under intense scrutiny. When Richard Gere married supermodel Cindy Crawford, their relationship became one of the most talked about celebrity unions of the time. But the reality behind the headlines was far more complicated. They met when they were at very different stages of life. Gere was already an established actor carrying years of experience and pressure. Crawford was still discovering herself while navigating sudden global fame. Their connection was real, but the imbalance was difficult. Their marriage quickly became the focus of constant media attention. Rumors circulated endlessly and speculation turned their relationship into public entertainment. Even when they denied the stories, the pressure never stopped. Behind the scenes, the strain slowly grew. Eventually, the marriage ended quietly. There was no scandal and no dramatic confrontation, only two people realizing they were moving in different directions. As the years passed, Gere gradually built a life far removed from the Hollywood spotlight. He focused more on humanitarian work, spirituality, and family. His later marriage brought a different kind of companionship, one based on shared values rather than public expectations. In public appearances, he appeared different. Softer, older, and more reflective. Less concerned with image and more focused on presence. The tragedy of Richard Gere's life is not found only in the losses he experienced. It lies in the cost of his integrity. He sacrificed momentum, influence, and comfort in order to remain aligned with his beliefs. He chose truth when silence might have protected his career. He chose retreat when the world expected performance. In doing so, he gained something rare: peace. But he also lost the world he once dominated. Richard Gere walked away from fame and certainty in order to stay true to himself. Do you think that choice was worth the cost he paid? If you enjoy stories about Hollywood legends, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.